Well, now the rest of our vegetables are chopped up. We're going to start off by rendering down, getting these onions real nice and soft so they make a good base. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw them in a pot, nice big one, with just a little bit of olive, well, actually quite a bit of olive oil or any other oil that you like to use. Now, because I love garlic, I'm using a homemade infused oil. Really easy to do. I'll show you how to do that maybe in another episode. Also going to throw in about 6 cloves of chopped or crushed garlic, however you like to do it. And get those on the go. Now, the way I make ratatouille and the way that some people make ratatouille in the actual traditional way vary quite greatly. I prefer to do everything in one pot and just keep the flavors separate by when I put everything in. The traditional way is to use a bunch of different pots and really cook everything separately and then put it all together just briefly and get mixed in. I find that takes a lot more time, makes a lot more pans, and actually becomes quite chaotic because you've got about 4 or 5 different pots on the go all the time. You're trying to chop, trying to put them together. This is a real simple way of doing it, and as long as you put the seasoning and vegetables in the right order, you'll find that you're going to still have a really varied flavor. Our sauce is going to be really heavy garlic, just because the garlic is going to infuse right into the onions, and then you're going to have that slight sweetness coming in from the red pepper, and the tomato is going to sort of, well, it's going to dampen that heavy garlic flavor for those of you who are a little unsure about how much I'm using. Remember, this is also making a lot of food. And then the French term for the seasoning we're using is herbe de Provence, which is going to season up quite nicely with the zucchini and the eggplant. And I'm going to bring it to a really nice finish. I also like to add a little bit of red wine. You can also use a red cooking wine or even a dry red vermouth, which I don't mind. I don't mind the flavor at all. I'm going to get those going. One reason I use red onion for my base in ratatouille is that there's a very clear indication of when they're done. White onion stays white while you cook it. The red onion is going to get it really, really soft, and a little bit of the color is going to start bleeding out of it. You got to keep it moving to get all the oil and to get it cooking really well. God, you smell the garlic coming off of it. The reason I chose ratatouille for our peasant dish week is whenever most of us think about French cuisine, we think about very gourmet, very high class, the pinnacle of cuisine, food. And I just like to point out that the best foods from a country aren't always the elite foods. I mean, even ratatouille now, when most people think about it, and if they haven't had it, think that it's very, very upper class, very proper, very French thing. In reality, it's a very peasant dish. It's very simple to make, and would have been incredibly cheap. I mean, farmers would have just been making this stuff. There's a fantastic thing just to have on the go, just have in the house all the time. Later on I'll show you how we're going to serve it. I might as well just talk about that now while we're waiting for our onions to go down. This can be served as a side dish, if you like. Make it with a chicken or a slice of beef or something and have it on the side. You can serve it over pasta. The way I prefer to serve it is on top of quinoa. And since so much of what we're using comes out of South America, might as well serve over quinoa. It's just a little healthier alternative to rice, which you can also use, or you can use couscous. But I like the slight nutty flavor in the quinoa. And it's easy to make, it's cheap, and this is an incredibly healthy meal. If you're looking to lose some weight or just detox, it's a fantastic thing because it's just vegetables, a little bit of wine, a little oil, and just seasoning. So it's incredibly healthy for you, and especially with the quinoa, Quinoa has the same amount of protein as dried whole milk, just without fat. So there's virtually no fat in this whatsoever. Just chock full of vitamins. There we go. So now that our onions are just about down, they'll keep cooking down as we add everything else. We're just going to throw our sliced red peppers in. Get them mixed in and going. Like I said, this is going to make a lot of food. Alright, now we've got a little bit of time while this is rendering down, so might as well have a drink. Alright, so our onion and pepper mixture all together has been cooking for about 20 minutes now. And as you can see, it's getting quite worked in. The onions are pretty much just globbing together and the peppers are nice and soft. So the next step is the tomatoes. One of the biggest differences between the traditional method of ratatouille and the way that I make ratatouille is in the tomatoes. Most traditional recipes will tell you that you need to peel and de-seed your tomatoes. I don't bother. They're going to render down and they're going to boil because we're actually cooking them for quite a while, so we don't need to. And all you're going to find is the seeds and that little extra bit of inside. It's going to make the ratatouille a lot more moist, make it a little bit saucier. Also right now, because we've got so much in our pot, that little bit of oil that was at the bottom that was cooking the onions and the green pepper or the red peppers isn't going to be quite enough to get the tomatoes cooked, otherwise it's going to take forever. So this is when I like to add my wine. Just a little bit for real nice flavor. Also helps if you cover this up and then the heat will just sort of work them on down. Now while this is going, I'll explain to you what I put into Herb de Provence. There's a basic recipe for it that you can find just about anywhere on the internet, but I take a few liberties with it just because there are certain flavors that I really love in this type of cooking. Your base for this seasoning mix is basil, marjoram, thyme, bay, actually lavender, fennel seeds, and parsley. Now the one thing I like to add to it is I skip the lavender because it's really hard to find and it's quite expensive. In this particular dish I'll skip the fennel seeds. You can crush them up. Tonight I'm choosing not to, otherwise you have big, hard, unpleasant seeds in your ratatouille. And I'm also adding fresh rosemary. So I've got that all mixed up here in a small bowl. Just about equal parts of everything. If there's a flavor you prefer one over the other, like I add a little bit, I use a little more thyme and a little more rosemary, and then a little less on the basil and the marjoram. I also add a little bit of cracked sea salt because I find it just brings out the flavors a little bit better, and it doesn't have the bitterness of regular table salt. So I'm just going to go ahead and crack a little bit of that into here. Now, seasoning I'm not going to give you amounts on. The whole thing should amount to between 2 and 4 tablespoons of seasoning that's going to go into a dish this size. If you really like more of one flavor, or you really like a lot of seasoning, I wouldn't go too much above 4 tablespoons, but if you go below 1 or 2, you're not going to taste anything. It's just going to be tomato. You're just going to have just strictly the vegetable flavor, and the garlic is really going to overpower the other seasonings. You got to be really careful about that, which is also why we're not throwing these herbs in yet. We're going to throw them in later, and that's going to keep their flavor from cooking into and mixing with the garlic too much, and they're going to stand out a lot more. Because they're only going to be cooking about as long as our zucchini and our eggplant is.